Welcome to the Doug and Mike Show. I'm Doug.
Hey, and I'm Mike.
Hey, Mike, we have real conversations with real people. Who's our special guest today?
Well, we are bringing you an awesome guest, a firefighter, a brother. Look, I'm reading this bio here. Doug, he's a son, grandson, brother, nephew, and the cousin of firefighters, Ed Kelly, and Ed, we call him Edzo Kelly from Boston Fire Department, and General Secretary, Treasurer of the International Association of Firefighters. Ed, thanks for coming on, bro.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. It's funny. I always say, you guys have probably heard me say it when I talk about my grandfather was on the job, my father was on the job, my uncles, cousins, brothers. I always say, we're not exactly social climbers. You know what I mean? We like our station in life. You know what I mean? We all kind of, and it's funny. I have a 10-year-old now that's, we have a term in Boston. We call people that chase fires sparks, and people that like the fire department, we call them Sparky. And my son's real sparky. He's really into it. Every time the truck goes by, Dad, the scanner, where they going? What do they got?
Wow, I love it. That's cool.
It's funny. So he's got a little bit of it in his blood too. We'll see if he holds on to it or not,
Well, we're going to just, we kind of did a little fast forward, but we're going to rewind a little bit now. So you were a young spark. So let's talk about.
I was.
Hopefully it was like a spark of not setting fires. It's definitely a good spark.
I don't think you meant that.
Yeah, right. Up here doesn't mean, although we have had sparks set fires. That's another story. So listen, I grew up in a house. I was the fifth of six kids. And matter of fact, as the story goes, when I was born out at St. Margaret's Hospital in the Brighton neighborhood St. Elizabeth's Hospital. My mother ended up working at St. Margaret's, which, not to confuse you, but St. Margaret's ended up merging with St. Elizabeth's. But it was St. Elizabeth's, and it was out in Brighton. And in order to get home from Brighton to Dorchester, the neighborhood I live in and grew up in, we kind of had to drive through the neighborhood where my father's firehouse was. So when my father picked me up from the hospital when I was born, the first place he took me was to the firehouse, which was 200 Columbus Avenue, which is where I'll be working Saturday morning at 0800.
Wow.
And okay. It's been kind of part of my life, my entire life, and it's almost like I joke about it, like that firehouse is like my mother's womb. When I go there, I'm home, and it's funny, like as much as I've been on the job, I have seniority now, I could probably transfer and go wherever I want. I just can't bring myself to ever leave that place.
Yeah, that's such a critical part.
The name of our firehouse is Broadway because up until the early 70s, the firehouse was a huge firehouse on a street called Broadway. And we've always kept that name, even though it's 50 years later, we're still known as Broadway. We're kind of like, I'm a Broadway guy is what they call me up here, a Broadway kid. So when I was a kid, I actually asked my father not too long ago. I said, Dad, because I was talking about my son being sparky and into the job. And I said, how old was I? Because my son wasn't always into the job. I'd ask him 2 or 3 years ago, hey, you want to go in the firehouse? I got to go pick something up or do something. Want to take a ride in? And he had no desire. Whereas when we were kids, my father would pick up his check, would all be piling into the car to go and play in the firehouse, And it's funny. So I asked my father, I said, when do you think how old was I when I really started getting into this? And he just looked at me and said, right after you started saying a dada, a mama, he's like, you were always a spark.
Wow.
And it's funny. So I've always kind of had that in my blood. And I never had a real good plan B. Mm-hmm. I always knew I wanted to be a fireman. And of course, when when I was a kid, I got a little bit older, I'd go in and ride around with my father on the truck, and I'd ride my bicycle into the firehouse. And when I was, maybe like a teenager, say, I'd ride my bike in when my father was working and go out on the runs with him and go on the fires with him and whatnot,
I mean, it's super
so I was
huge
always
family. Just all the guys in the station. Just it was not an issue of your kids showing up.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that big a deal. You know what I mean? It really wasn't. And we all, they would have Christmas parties. It Christmas time, Santa would come on the truck and bring presents. And we still do that every year. Would have summer outings and all the kids. So like all of us, the children of the firefighters that worked there, we all were friends, and we're all from different neighborhoods, and we were all friends throughout life. And I even worked in the firehouse with Peter Galunas, I'm godfather to his son, Peter, who's his father, Peter, worked with my father. And Peter was a private with me. Then he got promoted. He was my lieutenant for a while. So, there's a history there. Like, Johnny Martin, who's on ladder 17, my truck now. He's probably got 15 years on the job. But his father, Bubba Martin, was my senior man till he retired. And there's a lot of guys in the firehouse. Billy Hayhurst on ladder 17. His father died of occupational cancer. He was a chief in our house. He was only like 52, 53 when he died. And so there's a lot of generational, a lot of guys in my house. Johnny DeBow that I worked with was a lieutenant. He was a private on 17. I was a lieutenant on 17. His father didn't work at Broadway. He worked down the street. But, a lot of generational guys that I work with now that I knew as kids, just in that forum of being younger and around the firehouse as kids, So when I kind of came to
background, with that background, how did you end up in the Air Force?
Well, in Boston. So when I came of age, I graduated high school. I was running around like a nut in the city, like most all my pals. Mm-hmm. And the joke I have is we hung down a park, and there'd be 100 kids down there at night, and I'd always say, like, I stayed down the park and watched these trucks drive by me, waiting for one of them to say, "Hey, kid, I got a job for you. Hop in the back." But nobody did, mm-hmm. Whether it was the Edison, the phone company, of course, the fire would be the holy grail for me. And my uncle actually, who was in the building wreckers union, demolition union in Boston, he actually called my house for my older brother to see if he needed a job. And I said to him, actually, he has a job, but I need a job. And he goes, "How old are you?" I said, 18. He goes, "I didn't know you were that old." He goes, "All right, meet me down the corner at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning with some construction boots." And I went to work in the building wreckers union. And I did demolition for a couple of years. And when I was about 20, I started really forging in my head, like, what are you going to do with your life? And, most kids hopefully are doing that a little younger than me and 20, but I was a young kid. I was running wild, and so when I was 20, I kind of had this epiphany that if I wanted to be a fireman, I had to start focusing on what I had to do to get there. And in Boston and Massachusetts, we have civil service hiring practices and laws that date back to probably the First World War. Mm-hmm. And the way they hire in Boston is survivors, which is your mother or father gets killed in the line of duty. You go to the top of the list. Then they hire disabled veterans. Then they hire veterans. Then they hire civilians. So essentially, if you don't serve in the military, you have a very slim chance of getting on the fire department, city fire department in Massachusetts.
Wow, that's a great system, quite frankly.
So, wow, I'm blown away by that.
So kind of like how, if you wanted to go be an HVAC guy, you go to school and get your licenses to do heating and ventilation work, right? If you want to be a firefighter in Massachusetts, you go in the military, you do your time. And that's what I did. And I was talking to the older kids in the neighborhood, two in particular. One's a police lieutenant now, one's a police sergeant now. Two of my older brother's pals, and they were just getting out of the service. And I was saying, no, I'm thinking of going. And actually I told them, after talking to them, I just said, yeah, I'm taking a train in town. I'm going to go join the service. And they said, what branch? And I said, I hadn't thought about that yet. And they're both like, one just got out of the Navy, one just got out of the Air Force. They both said, go in the Air Force. So I took the train in town, and I knew I wanted to be a firefighter. I knew the Air Force, the Marines, the Army, the Navy, everyone had firefighters. I knew that much. So I went to the Air Force guy because they told me to. I said, hey, I want to be a firefighter. The guy said, no, I don't have any firefighter jobs. I can get you in security police or this or that. I said, never mind. I'll go next door to the Marine guy. And when I was walking out the door, recruiters are like car salesmen. Like, oh, wait a minute. one just came open. Can you leave in March?
Sure.
I'm like, yeah, all right.
That was your first negotiations then, huh?
Yeah. So I went in the Air Force, and I had a great experience. You know, I had met great people. The training I got in the DOD in the Air Force was unbelievable. It was like force-fed firefighting, and it was a great experience. My little Spock just came downstairs now.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Tell everybody his name.
Tommy Kelly.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully someday he's on the job. We'll see. Time will tell.
And so the Air
Force. He's going to traverse this landscape the way I did too, you know?
Oh, certainly. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's going to be waiting on that guy to drive up and offer him a job out front.
Yeah, they're going to keep right on going.
Yeah. And that Air Force experience actually brought you down to Florida, made you got you close to Doug and Mike down here.
850, baby.
In the 850 in the Panhandle.
That's right. I was stationed. I went to, boot camp in Texas, and then I went to tech school in Texas at Goodfellow when they had just moved the DoD Fire Academy from Chanute down to Goodfellow. And then I got orders on to Tyndall Air Force Base in Panama City, Florida, and that's where I was stationed for the next 3 years, which was great. I mean, I had a great experience. Worked with great guys. Had a lot of laughs. It was good duty.
Was the language barrier a problem down there in Northwest Florida?
I tried to explain to them that I wasn't a Yankee; I was a Red Sox, but they didn't know the difference.
They didn't get that. You may have had a few other pals in there that were from the north, so you probably had some backup.
Not many. Most of them were all kids from the South, but they were great kids. They were awesome.
So that experience really, it had helped you with federal firefighting, understanding their issues.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we worked a 72-hour work week every morning at 6:55. We were standing in front of our bunker gear, coming or going at roll call. I got to do things that, in the city of Boston, we don't do wildland fires. We don't do forest fires. And I got to see some forest fires, and they're scary. And the reason they call them wildfires. And I also got to see, we had, before drones were what they are today, when no one really used the word drone back in the mid-'90s. I'm sure they had them before the mid-'90s. When I was there in the mid-'90s, they had drones, old Korea-era fighter jets that they put remote controls into, and they would fly them out over the Gulf. And we had 3 fighter training squadrons down there for F-15s. And they'd go out and dogfight these old remote control planes, which were full F-106s and F-4s. I mean, they were full Korea-era fighter jets.
Yeah, sure.
And we had a separate runway on Tyndall just for those jets. So they crashed, not all the time, but I probably saw more plane crashes than most guys at an international airport, because those remote controlled jets would crash into the woods.
Sure.
And they all had explosives packages in them that if they were losing control over them, they would just blow them up out over the Gulf.
Okay, got it.
And not try to fly them back onto land.
Sure.
So we'd have to sit and watch the thing till the explosives cooked off. And what would happen is those things would crash off the runway into the woods, and we couldn't go near it till the explosives blew off. And by the time we got in, the explosive package would blow off. The woods would all be going. And most of the time we caught it, but once in a while those fires were going for acres. I got to do a lot of cool things that, as a firefighter, that helped round me for what I'm doing now. And after the service, I got out of the service in '97. I took both tests, the cops and fire tests, which would be the norm up here for city kids that want to get into civil service. And I actually got called for the police. It was right about the time that the Clinton cops bill was translating into jobs into the cities, and the cops were hiring a ton of classes. And I actually got called for the cops, but by the time I got out of the service, I missed that police class. And then when I got upgraded on the civil service list with my veteran status, I got in right at the end of a class for the fire department. So I was lucky. I went on the fire, let me think, for about 4 months after I got out of the military.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it worked out good.
Right.
And
Sure.
I was lucky. I went back to building wrecking a little bit. I went back down the Union Hall, put me back to work wrecking for a few months. And then I got on the fire department. And, it's been great ever since.
Yeah. No, and that was my next question is like everybody, a lot of our listeners, obviously know who you are, may have met you through the years, and they know just, how you've been involved in the labor movement, particularly, all things are local, right? So, all these, the different parts of the state, parts of the world, the labor movement's, just a little bit different, but you've been in such a very intense, environment up there with the labor movement. And so what was that like for you? Like, what were the beginning, pages and chapters of your life with the labor movement?
I'd have to say we grew up in this kind of like environment where in Boston, being in a union was part of your almost identity, we have families that are longshoremen. We have families that are iron workers, families that are electricians. And that's kind of like the traditions of the city. And anytime, as you're coming of age, if you're lucky enough to get into a trade or one of the unions, like that's a big deal, to have. As you guys, every kid has to come of age and try to get a job at some point. And that's a big step. So for us, being part of individual unions are a part of our identity, and it's something you take great pride in. And, when I got on the fire department, my father was a firefighter. My mother it's funny. My mother's father was a firefighter. He come on in like 1939, I think. And Boston didn't have a union until 1942, which is an interesting story. You would think that the IAFF being chartered in 1918, Boston's a charter local. They're one of the cities that helped form the IAFF. But shortly thereafter, there was the police strike in Boston in 1919. And they outlawed public employees from having unions after that.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
Boston chartered with the IAFF in 1918, then lost their charter in 1919. And it took them till 1942 to actually recharter a union, which I don't know. I wasn't around then, but as the legend goes, there was some hard fought effort, literally fight to start a union in Boston in 1942. And basically what had transpired was, without the union, clubs formed. And one of the big clubs was known as the Russell Club. And it was basically all the leadership of the fire department were in this club. And you got transferred, promoted, hired, etc. by a club where you sat in the club. So the union was a political threat to the clout of the club, the Russell Club. So that was like a major friction between the guys that wanted to start a union and the guys that were running the fire department in that club.
Right. And
there was, as the legend goes, there might have been some broken bones over that effort. That my mother grew up. She was, let me think. So my grandfather went on in 39-ish. He might have went on about 1939. My mother was probably born 2 or 3 years later. And she has like an unbelievable memory of the fire department, the union, back, not so much in the 40s, but probably like in the 50s and 60s. And then when my father got on in the late 60s, he got involved in the union. He was on he was a district rep, and then he was on the bargaining team. I was a kid at the time. I don't remember much of it. I remember going in town and marching on picket lines with all that stuff, which was just the promise of an ice cream after going in and marching in circles, But, my father was involved in the union. So like I guess my point is, in our consciousness, being part of the union no matter what union it is in Boston, as a kid growing up in this city when I did, that was a big identity of who you were. And so it was a natural tendency to involve yourself in it. And my older brother, Sean, my oldest brother, got on the job in 93, I think, 1990, around 93, maybe 92. But he was involved in the union. Before I was involved in the union, he was elected to the executive board. And I'm trying to think if he was treasurer when I got elected to the executive board. He might have been. He might have moved up to treasurer while I was when I got on the executive board. But I got on in 97. And my first elected office or role that I ever filled was a delegate to the state convention, which technically I lost the election. I had to be in like the top 10 and I came in 11th. One of the older guys that have been a delegate for a long time, a guy named Jackie Joyce, great guy. He's a rescue lieutenant. We were in the bar after our union hall. And he was like, "Oh, Kelly, you lost after the election." He's like, "Oh, you didn't pull out?" He goes, where'd you finish? I said, I was like 11. I had to be in the top 10 or something. He goes, he finished like 2 or 3 or something. He's like, "Well, you know what? I've been going to these things for years. When you younger kids got to get involved in this stuff, you go. I'm not going. I pull my name out." And that was my first union role.
Wow.
Guy named Jackie Joyce let me fill it. So I was a delegate to the state union convention, which was great, and we also have a subcommittee in Boston called the Death and Welfare, and you help people with their pensions and stuff like that. You run the funerals. You do a lot of like behind the scene work. It's a sub board from the executive board, but it's an elected position as a trustee. You have a 3-year term, then you have to step down your time out. And I ran for that a couple of years later, and I got elected to that role. And then I ran for the executive board probably in 2002. And I was on the executive board for about 3 years and ran for president in 2005. And I ran against an incumbent, and I had about 8 years on the job, which was baby steps back then. I mean, nowadays, I have I'm in my 23rd year on the fire department, and I'm senior man on the company, both companies in my house. And probably, I have good seniority right now.
Yeah.
But to put that in perspective,
a lot of turnover.
Put that in perspective, in 2005, I remember John Singleton, great guy that I worked with on 17, had 25 years on the job. And he was like third in line to be senior man on his group. Freddie Finn and Duke Mitchell each had more time than him. And I'm like, I always thought about that. I'm like, imagine having 25 years on the job. You're not even close to being a senior on your group.
Dude,
and that's
boost.
So when I ran for president in 2005, I was like a kid. I was almost dismissed. Like, what does this kid think he is running for president? But I went out and worked. I hit all the firehouses. We have 33 firehouses in the city, and I hit every firehouse kitchen, every group, and
you hustled.
And I hustled, and I tipped an incumbent and won by about 100 votes, which wasn't a huge. That's not a huge victory, It was close. And
you won. That's the bottom line. At the end of the day, they don't ask you your paramedic score. They say, "Are you a paramedic?" Right. So you're a union president.
Right.
So
yeah, it was. I thought that the union needed some fresh air and some change, and I was kind of butting heads with the then president. It wasn't really like I aspired to be the president of the union. That wasn't the case. It was more like, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. And we've always, my father was always one of the guys like, don't sit around bitching. You think something got to be changed, go change. Don't expect someone else to do it for you.
Yeah, the hustle side of it. I mean, the work ethic. All the mentors. I mean, is that something that inspired you to get into the work itself? Is just the fact that it's and I remember you wrote this in one of your pieces in the magazine there, but it's like, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. Yeah.
There's an absolute truth to that. And as a matter of fact, I had to go down a training academy, do a little training about a month ago, and there was a new recruit class in there. And I said that exact thing. I said, hey, you're going to get out of this what you put into it. And, basically right down to don't walk by a full trash barrel. That's your job. Doesn't matter whether you got 25 years on your probie. It's your house.
Yes.
You know, my theory is, my mantra is, I always call it the firehouse up here. We always call it firehouse in Boston, never station. And my argument was always, I live there. That's my home. My work is when I go out the door in someone else's house. That's where I work, you know, and you take care of your home and you leave it better than you found it. Is one of the great mantras of this job and what we do. And probably there's another little twinge in here that I got to throw in about what motivates you. And it goes back to when I was a kid. It was 1981, so I would have been about 8 years old. And there was a big fire, about 5 blocks from my firehouse, where that fire was, Arlington and Newberry Street. And there was a collapse, and a bunch of firefighters were trapped. And I was a kid. I was running around, you know, and I just remember the stress my mother was under, smoking. You remember when phones used to be on the wall? We have to explain that to some people on here.
You have to stand there next to it with the cord.
Yeah, and she was sitting in a chair with an AM radio going, listening to the radio, chain smoking. And I just remember the stress that my mother had that day. And what it was, you know, naturally firefighters are killed. And matter of fact, the 2 guys that got killed, I went to drill school with one of their nephews, and the other ones, Jimmy, that was Paul Lentini's nephew, Billy Miller. I went on the job with a good friend of mine, a lieutenant in the job. And the other guy that got killed that day in 1981 was Jimmy Gibbons. His son, Sean, was my captain on 17 for a while. Great guy, super guy. And but my father was on the first due. He was the boss on the first due engine that day. He was a senior man. And he was in the building when it fell. So luckily, it wasn't my father's day to die. You know,
Wow.
My father always told me when the building starts, he's been in a bunch of collapse. He says, when the building starts to go, get to a doorway, because that's where it's going to stop, you know? And that's, so that I always remember that. And I always think about, like, when you think about what motivates you, us, right? All of us have taken a piece of our lives and dedicated to the IAFF, which is to say we're dedicating it to our brothers and sisters that we go out the door with that don't come home. And that's really where a huge piece of my motivation has always been. Like, we deserve the best. We deserve to be taken care of. What we do for others is unmatchable. We lay down our lives. Like, that's it. That's the full measure. That's all you can do. That's all you can give. It's all of yourself.
Like the tip of the spear, as you always say.
Correct. You know, that's it. That's what we do. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I said it in a video that went on a month ago or something, but it just came to me. I've never really said it this way, but it came to me that night. Like, what we committed ourselves to do is to jump into any fight anyone is ever going to have with anything, whether it's their heart going into arrest, whether they're being jumped and you're driving down the street in a fire truck. We don't drive by that, you know, like if your building's on fire and your children are in the building, we're coming like crazed dogs, and we are going to do everything in our power, up to including die, trying to change the outcome. And that's that type of sacrifice and that type of willingness to sacrifice inspires me to fight for the people that are willing to do that.
It's like I always say, you can earn your paycheck on one call for your career.
Yeah. It's a fact. I mean, look at on 9/11. There were kids in probie school. Their first fire was getting loaded up on buses and sent down to ground zero. That's a harsh reality of what this job is, you know. And this job is brutal. This job, you know, the odds are greater that this job is going to come get you at some point than you live happily ever after. The odds are, whether it's heart disease, lung disease, cancer, your body being banged up. Like one of my good friends, a great guy, he was our chief down in District 4 for a long time, sold his house, bought a nice little townhouse on a golf course, That was his retirement plan. Everything was good. And then his back blew out after 40 years on the job. You know, he wasn't a cheat. He was a long time company officer. So he was in there falling downstairs, ceilings coming on his head, twisting and turning and getting beat up for, 35 of his 40 years on the job. And he bought that joint down on a golf course and never got to golf. And that's like one of those lessons about this job. Like it comes and gets you, and I think the trade-off is that we love what we do. And that's, you can't put we don't go to quote work. We go to fulfill what makes us what we're called to do. And that there's a difference there. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's why I think it translates into a lot of us being, by and large, your uncle that's the firefighter is usually the happy guy at the party, the family party that you can't get the smile off his face, right? Like that's part of who we are. We get to give, which is, I use the analogy, I don't get deep here, but when you're a kid and at Christmas time, at some point in your life, you realize you're more excited watching someone open the present you got them than the president opening the present that you got. Right? At some point, you realize that. And that's because it feels better to give than to receive. And when you think about what we give, it's such a great reward as individuals to make a difference in people's lives, especially on the worst day of their life, which is usually what we have as our regular routine call. It's a do nothing. You guys have been doing it for decades. You go out to someone's house that's having a stroke and you get there in time and you go get them and you push drugs and they end up fine. Well, that was the worst day of their lives. That could have been the most catastrophic event in their life. But you probably did 5 runs after that on an ambulance or on the engine and going out to people's houses and doing things. And that was just one run for you. You might not even remember it a month later. But for that person, you walked into their life at the most critical moment and pulled them back. And that's
made a difference.
There's something to be said for that. That's our reward. Our cost is that you might get killed when you go out the door. Our cost is that when you grow old, you're probably going to be in a lot of pain from your body taking a beating. You may very well get very sick and die at a young age because of what we do. Because of that, that's the trade-off. And that's where us as union leaders for this IAFF, that's where the fight is. You know what I mean? We got to make sure the people that are sick, that are hurt, that get killed, that their families are taken care of. And that's they lie at the battle.
Well, I can tell you that we're really connecting with your message. I mean, I know you mentioned the other day about your video you pushed out in the firehouse there, but our guys at the station circled around and watched it, and it's. I guess I'm trying to encourage you here. Is what I'm doing, telling you that to keep it up because, like you said, you feel like you might be getting a little deep on some things, and maybe things that you normally would just do at a bar in a small circle, but now with social media and technology, we can do that, cast a wide net. But I'm telling you, people are connecting with it. I'm connecting with it. The resiliency theme and all that is powerful, and keep doing it. I mean, if you're not, for our listeners out there that go on, YouTube or Facebook and check out some of these videos and narratives that Edzo's pushing out, because it's good stuff. We talk about it in our firehouse all the time. But we're about to shift gears right now on you, Edzo.
All right, Edzo, we're gonna bring this aircraft in, hopefully on a remote control safe landing. But you, my friend, are now going to enter the lightning round. Okay. So we're going to ask you a series of questions, and you don't get a lot of time to think about it. Okay, it's like being on the hot seat. So do you accept the challenge?
No phone and a friend.
No phone and a friend.
No phone and a friend. All right. Here's the first question. Here we go. Question number 1: what is something you've never done but you would like to do?
Jump out of an airplane.
If you could call up anyone in the world and have an hour-long conversation with them, who would it be? Even if they're deceased.
My grandfather.
If you could try out any job for 1 week, which one would you choose?
Any job for 1 week? What job would I choose?
Yes.
Fighter pilot.
If you could learn the answer to one question, Edzo, about your future, what would that be?
What is tonight's lottery number?
All right, let's go with 2 more here.
Man, I love that lottery number.
Hey, buy 2 tickets, by the way, when you get that.
Yeah.
All right. Have you ever been busted by your parents when you were a kid, skipping school or drinking?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
All right, last one. Drum roll on this one. Edzo, did you have any nicknames in the firehouse?
Blue Eyes is what Malane would call me.
That's it, huh? Blue Eyes. Well, brother, we appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us, to be on the show. We appreciate all the work you do at local level and on the job, and one of the oldest fire departments in the world up there, and then being the great leader at the IAFF that you are, and a mentor to us. We love having you, Doug. You want to bring this thing down? Anything else you want to add?
I just say that age is a number, and anybody can inspire, and you've inspired us. So thank you for what you do.
Well, hey man, it's an honor to serve, and still I think the greatest job I've ever had is just riding backwards on a ladder truck. It's not no offense to the engine guys, because as much as I want to torture them and call them speed bumps in the hallway and keep my pride up, I have to admit, at the end of the day, once everyone's out of the building, we just got to help the engine guys put the fire out. I hate to say it, but it's true, and that's the best job I ever had, is riding backwards on a ladder truck, and that's why, I still go in the firehouse to this day, because it's who I am, it defines me. So, hey, thank you guys for what you guys do. And like we said, may we all be able to say, or may they say about us, that we left it better than we found it.
Amen.
God bless you guys. Hey, I always say the tagline, I think I told you, each of you guys this, but shortly after it was, I forget which fire was first, but they lost 2 guys in New York City down at Ground Zero in the Deutsche Bank fire in 2007. And we had lost 2 guys either 2 weeks before that or 2 weeks after. I forget which fire was first. But I was down in Manhattan, in Lower Manhattan, and in a firehouse that they got killed in. I want to say it was Ladder 5. But I was with Jimmy Slevin, who's now the first district vice president. At the time, he was the New York City UFA vice president, rather. And we went in the firehouse, we visited the guys, and on the chalkboard, a chaplain had just been in there, visited them, and left. And he wrote, "Be you, be strong, be firefighters." And I thought that was something that always struck me. And, when you try to deal with the bad side of this job, don't forget that society chose us to fill a role that they need. That's dirty, ugly, and comes with sacrifice. But we're just the right people to do it. So be you, be strong, be firefighters.
Love that, folks. What an amazing interview. That's all the time we have for today's show. Thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Doug and Mike Show. And a special thanks to our sponsor, Chief Miller. You can find him on Instagram, Edzo. Thank you so much, brother.
All right, you guys.
God bless.
Hey, happy Memorial Day. God bless our troops who made the ultimate sacrifice.